myself again. Am I audible?
Yeah.
I don't need the mic. Okay, awesome. Okay, I thought you wanted to tell me something. So I will be speaking on the disparities of the implementation of gender equality or activism policies for different organizations between Germany and South Africa. And I have a slide that will cover all the limitations to my project. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I have to be the first one to present because SDG 5 is just microphone?
Yeah, because of the recording.
Okay, awesome. I probably should stand aside. Okay. All right, thank you. So I will just, go back to what I was explaining in terms of my topic. So I became very interested in what are some of the common themes that we get between Germany and South Africa when it comes to implementing policies for gender equality. So, yes, just waiting for the slide to load properly. Awesome. So here I have pinned down some of the activities ever since the establishment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We all know that they used to be called the Millennium Goals, and then they went on to be called the Sustainable Development Goals. And so there's just certain activities that have taken place that speak to the research that I have been doing in the last few months. So we learned that, in 2012, there was an establishment of the Solution Network, which is part of the efforts to fast track the implementation of these goals. As my host alluded to, the inner work as one of those efforts to encourage the implementation of these goals. And in 2015, we also learned that the United Nations actually adopted and established that solution network that was then decided upon in 2012. In 2016, that's when we started seeing the implementation of that. And then something interesting happens in 2020. They celebrate the 25th anniversary of the World Women Conference. So basically the topic of gender equality has been going on. In 2020 as well, there was the 20th anniversary was also celebrated for the resolution 1325, which speaks to the promotion of women as the main role players for conflict resolution and peace maintenance around the world. And in 2023, we are still fighting the battle of gender equality, even with all the activities that I have just mentioned that happened in the last 11 years. Some of the other things that also took place, as far back as 1976 until 1985, this was then declared as a decade, as the Women Decade in the Second World Conference in Denmark in 1980. Then we had the Beijing Declaration as far back as 1995, and the first UN World Women Conference was held in Mexico in 1975. I will not go through all that because you can see it on my screen, but what I'm trying to raise and what I'm trying to help us to think about is the fact that sometimes there's so many inputs without output. Sometimes we do so much activity, and sometimes the activity does not always yield the type of results that we are aiming for, or the type of world problems that we are collaboratively trying to solve. I just want us to take a quick glance at what is happening in South Africa in terms of issues that women are faced with. So my particular research is focused on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5, and I'm looking at Target 5.5, which I'll speak about shortly. These issues that are being highlighted on this particular slide does not necessarily only speak to my research, but it also addresses just many other issues that are happening within, the space of South Africa. We learned that about 35.7% of women aged between 18 and 55 are actually unemployed. We also learned that 25 to about 40 women have experienced sexual abuse. And the most shocking one for me is the one that I put at the top purposefully. About 115 women are raped daily. And that for me is really sad. And that for me emphasizes the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals and the importance of collaboration for us to come together to achieve Agenda 2030. So Target 5.5 focuses on ensuring that women's full effective participation and equal opportunities in all levels of leadership, in decision-making positions in the economy and political spaces. So empowering women and girls is not going to be solved by just putting a policy together or even implementing a policy in our organizations. It will require more than that. I have also learned that systematic exclusion that has happened for decades over the years are not going to just take, the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 5 over 1 decade to solve problems that are systematic in nature. In 2023, almost 2 decades later, ever since South Africa gained its democracy, to this day, we are still facing issues of having a lack of representation of women in parliament. So as it stands, as you can see, we only have 45% of women that are represented in parliament, which is the highest decision-making body in South Africa. Making South Africa the 3rd in the world, the first one is Rwanda, and I think Senegal is the 2nd one. And for me, it is painful to also highlight or see that Rwanda in the whole world is the only country that has above 50%, in the continent of Africa, that has above 50% of a representation of women in parliament. That should get us thinking even deeper. So I've just highlighted what brought me to Germany, or what became something that I wanted to participate in forming the solution. So I chose this picture particularly. Thank you to Stock Images. So I'm referencing them, okay? So please, no Poppy Act. We have what we call the Poppy Act in South Africa. So Stock Images. And this was me before I started my journey with the German Chancellor Fellowship, where I was aware of the problems around me, but my placard was blank. I was not doing or saying anything. So when I saw this fellowship, I thought, yes, the time has come where I can become actively a part of the solution. And that's why today I wish to discuss a bit further about the transformative practices for policy implementation to support gender equality. So if we do have policies, and indeed policies are being implemented, why are we still sitting with the rising numbers of these cases that we are not happy about globally? This also says to me that there has to be a change when it comes to how we're implementing policies, because policies are formulated to solve problems, but not all policies are solving the actual problems. So I started this project last year in October at my host institution, MINC. You saw my host presenting at the video, and that's when the journey started. So here I just have the demographics in terms of the institutions that I targeted for my project. So there I have our state. So I live in the north of Germany, in Kiel, in Schleswig-Holstein. I hope I pronounced it properly. So that's where my host organization is based, and there's also an organization that has been helpful in the process in terms of advising and helping with issues of my survey, which is based in Bonn. So those are the populations of, both Schleswig-Holstein, Kiel and Bonn. And there the target was the 3 institutions for Germany. Then for South Africa, I decided to also target 3 institutions. They are all based in the Western Cape, in Cape Town and Knysna. The questions that I thought I want to answer, or seeking for answers to, was how does policy implementation strategies affect the outcome of policies? I also asked the question of which policy implementation practices are effective for gender transformation. So we are resolving the problem of access and representation. That's target 5.5. Does policy implementation practices affect the effectiveness of policies? Those are questions that I'm still asking to this day. I also wanted to find out, how is Germany approaching, implementing policies for gender equality? And are there prevalent practices? Are there any links between Germany and South Africa? Hoping that at the end of the day, one could then get to best practice. So ultimately, I guess my major research question was, how might we establish best practice to foster gender equality through transformative policy implementation practices? And what are those? From the organizations I've engaged with and policy custodians that I've engaged with, no one can confidently say to me, this is transformative policy implementation practices. So I'm hoping by the end of October, I'll have an answer to that. I'm hoping. So what's most important on this slide is all the participating organizations. You see Alexander von Humboldt there. Underneath there is my host, Mink. And I've had professors assisting me at Christian Albert Universiteit in Kiel, and staff from EDOS, and yeah. One of the methodologies that I followed, or gathering the perceptions of the policy beneficiaries as well as the policy custodians, is that I appreciated some qualitative approaches, and they looked different for each organization. With policy custodians, for example, I focused more on having in-depth interviews to understand what is it that they understand about policy and how do they approach the policy implementation. In terms of the policy beneficiaries, I then focused on them answering a survey to say, are policies being implemented? Question number 1. Question number 2, are the policies achieving what they're being implemented to achieve? And what are the beneficiaries or the end user experiencing? So what is the end user experience? Because when it comes to reporting on SDGs, when it comes to reporting on SDG 5 particularly, you can go on the United Nations website and all the information is available there. But what is actually really happening in the organizations? And what are the themes that we can trace and actually learn from to make sure that we bring about a fostering to attaining this Agenda 2030? So if we do not detect some of the unspoken about challenges when it comes to policy implementation or the fostering of these SDGs, we could easily just miss out on the full effectiveness of these goals. And that's why this was important for me. And earlier on I spoke about limitations. I just want to declare that the sample size for my research does not represent the whole of South Africa and the whole of Germany. And obviously you would understand our fellowship is for a limited time, and so you have to also do your sample sizing in such a way that you're able to complete your project by the end of at the end date. So I have no statistical verification for all the data that I'm speaking on, and perceptions of people, even as you interview them or even as they answer surveys, can be biased, right? And the outcome of this project, whatever recommendations that I would touch on at the end of my presentation, does not guarantee 100% success. If you implement them in your organization, it does not mean tomorrow you will wake up with, a complete transformed organization that fully supports women and their participation in decision-making positions. So some of these may not be suitable for your organization, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. So as I conclude my presentation, these are some of the themes that are starting to come out on my surveys. So let me declare that my project is not done. There's still lots that I need to tie up in terms to in order to get certain results at the end, or to answer that question of what is best practice when it comes to implementing gender equality policies in research and academic institutions. So the themes are starting to come out to say that policies are not always implemented. Sometimes in organizations, what happens is just a tick box activity to say we've designed a policy that embraces SDG 5, and so we have a policy, we tick the box, we move on, and policies are not necessarily being implemented. Gender policies are not always workshopped or explained or even understood by mostly the policy beneficiaries. So the people who the policy is supposed to affect, or the people that are supposed to experience the real change, are not experiencing it because they don't understand the policies. Gender policies are not always streamlined into the business. And what I found mostly with Germany is that when it comes to fostering SDG 5, there's a restructuring with most of the organizations or the units within the organizations. There's a restructuring that tends to happen to foster the implementation of the policy. What also happens is that there's enough investment for projects and programs to be run to foster the implementation of the policy. However, in South Africa, it's not always the case, where sometimes the resources are maybe not even available to then design programs to foster the implementation of the policy. There's also an assumption that policies will always work without fail. So it's like we have a good document and our organization has now adopted or endorsed the document, so automatically it's supposed to work. So what am I leaving us with this afternoon? If we are all going to participate into successfully achieving Agenda 2030, we have to ask certain important questions. We have to even question our participation in the process of achieving Agenda 2030. We also have to think to ourselves, whatever activities that we are involved in, are they working? If they are working as they should? And what is it exactly that I myself can change? What is within my control that I can change to make sure that I become part of the masses that are wanting to achieve Agenda 2030? So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention.